So some of them turned into like making malt. They already had the machinery for it. So they made malt for like the home brewers to like home brew with, and to like use the near beers and like make it not near beer anymore. It was very, very silly, but that was actually like a big reason they produced all this malt. In addition, they use it for sugars, for candy bars, and all sorts of cool stuff. And then where this comes into play with like the Dust Bowl and everything that was going on with the farms. This overproduction was in the South as all this was happening, and cattle were dying and they were being starved out and there wasn't enough nutrients. You go up north and a lot of the breweries started investing in like dairy farms and dairy cattle. And that business was pretty well booming. You had ice cream, you had cheeses, like, so now like they're able to supplement and keep all those farmers that honestly they're probably a lot of the same farmers that helped them get the ingredients they needed for brewing are now like they're supporting them in another way, and it's just this big drastic difference between the two areas. Greeting fellow beer connoisseurs and beer lovers. It's another beautiful day at Body by Beer podcast. My name's Chelsea Rhoads. This is my best friend Elizabeth.
Hello, you can call me Liz. And today we are diving into a fascinating part of beer history that intertwines with some of America's most challenging times, the Great Depression and the Prohibition.
Yes.
That's right. So yeah, we're ready to go back in time and discuss this era of depression, prohibition, and we're even going to throw in a few tidbits about organized crime and bootlegging.
Yeah.
But first, we got a bit of...
So first off, in our brew news, I don't know if you guys have heard of this brewery, Backacre Beer Maker. Originally founded in Vermont in 2010. 2 years ago or so, they relocated to Denver. The cool thing about these guys, what they do that's unique, is they actually only produce one beer.
What?
One beer. They, on average, release it once or twice a year.
Okay.
And they basically just release different batches. They're on their 16th right now. They focus on different fermentation processes, different yeast strains in it. Kind of giving you this unique blend of like a gueuze, Tripel, Saison type of styles. It's brewed at Bierstad Lagerhouse currently. Nice. And they pull it into their own place and they let it age for months and months. I have it in here. Where's that? So the brewing process is actually done at Bierstad Lagerhouse. Yeah, great brewery there. And then they get it pulled back into the Backacres where they put everything into the wooden barrels up to 4 or 5 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah, long time they sit and age. It's a really cool concept. So it's very, very limited releases. I think they said like 700-ish bottles.
Okay. We better get on it.
Yeah, you got to get on it. They released it to a handful of local restaurants and liquor stores around in the area. They also pump some back into Vermont because, again, that's where they're from. It's a pretty cool concept. I've heard people that have had it that's really good. I have yet to have it. Like I said, we're trying to find it out on the hunt for it. It's really interesting. I have actually never heard of a brewery that only did a single beer, and they got the concept when they did a tour in Belgium. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of cool. And they're like, we can't really do this full time. And so they just decided to do one beer and do it really, really well and create a big demand. I love that.
Yeah, anything worth doing is worth doing right.
Yeah, even if it's only one.
All right, so I got the lowdown on Westbound and Down and what they've been doing, and they've been acquiring while we've been sitting here drinking and talking about beer. Good for them. Everybody's got to make money in different ways.
Yeah.
But not only did they expand into Lafayette, I believe, last year, and then they also made it into the Denver milk market, I believe. But recently, I know, I read that. It just came about in this article. But they recently acquired Aspen Brewing and Capitol Creek Brewing from High Country. Well, Aspen has a 7,000 barrel facility. Wow. So that only adds to Westbound's production. And it adds 2 popular brew pubs to its portfolio, right? So Aspen Tap in downtown Aspen, which apparently we've been to, and Capitol Creek Brew Pub in Basalt. So anyway, as a part of Westbound and Down's expansion, their chef, Casey Taylor, kudos, the food is delicious. He's going to now manage all of the culinary programs at these locations in addition to their existing responsibilities. Yeah, so this move follows the 2022 launch of a mini tap room at the Dairy Block in Denver. So, which is pretty cool. So this is just an ongoing, commitment to growth and innovation in the Colorado's dynamic brew scene.
Well, we're really excited about this main segment.
Super excited.
So we're just gonna kind of dive into that really quickly. We're just gonna jump right in. We're gonna not hold up on that, and we're gonna go right into main segment. So what are we gonna be talking about here today, Lizzie?
We are discussing a fascinating part of beer history, as I said earlier, that intertwines with some of America's most challenging times, the Great Depression and Prohibition.
Yes. It's a tale of beer, bread, and dust storms.
All right, so let's set the scene. It's 1929. The stock market tanks, and America enters the Great Depression, a period of severe economic downturn.
At the same time, we're in the midst of the Prohibition. There's no legal alcohol, including beer, which is heartbreaking for
very sad.
Especially us beer lovers. The law was in effect in 1920, and it went until 1933.
Here's where it gets even more interesting. So during World War I, 1914 to 1918, the government urged farmers, especially in the southern plains, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, parts of Colorado, to produce heaps of wheat. They didn't want to just feed the nation, but they wanted to be able to feed the world.
Okay. But because this land was so over-farmed, when the drought hit in 1930, so again, we're still in the midst of Prohibition, there was the devastating Dust Bowl that happened. And the farms were ruined, and people were out of work, and they were desperate, and
dying.
It was an awful time.
Terrible. So not just awful for them, but let's not forget about the breweries, right? That's why we're here. Prohibition hit them so hard. Breweries like Miller and Coors, Yingling, Anheuser-Busch, mostly located in the northern states, had to find creative ways to survive.
Yep. So some of them turned into making malt. They already had the machinery for it. So they made malt for the home brewers to homebrew with, and to use the near beers and make it not near beer anymore. It was very, very silly, but that was actually a big reason they produced all this malt. In addition, they use it for sugars, for candy bars, and all sorts of cool stuff. And then where this comes into play with the Dust Bowl and everything that was going on with the farms. This overproduction was in the South as all this was happening, and cattle were dying, and they were being starved out, and there wasn't enough nutrients. You go up north, and a lot of the breweries started investing in dairy farms and dairy cattle, and that business was pretty well booming. You had ice cream, you had cheeses, so now they're able to supplement and keep all those farmers that honestly they're probably a lot of the same farmers that helped them get the ingredients they needed for brewing are now they're supporting them in another way, and it's just this big drastic difference between the two areas.
Truly, quite the stark contrast. So prosperity, even out of desperation, I mean, they did prosper in one area and then severe hardship in the other. I mean, this period really shaped the brewing industry in agriculture in the U.S.
Yeah. So in 1933, as Prohibition ended, Franklin D. Roosevelt was the president. He ended Prohibition, which obviously was a lifeline for breweries getting ramped up and getting going again. And in addition, he also created conservation programs that encouraged farmers to plant natural grasses.
But it is incredible how beer history, getting into this, I don't think it was so blaringly obvious to me, but it's so closely tied to these significant events that have truly shaped our society as it is today, and the resilience of these industries, brewing, agriculture. Incredible amount of people just dying because their lungs were full of dust.
When they have any food. I mean, and like
Also starvation.
Yeah, the psychological impact
Yeah.
on stuff like that. Like you really have to be able to persevere. You have to be able to fight. Something that was interesting that as we were talking through this, that outside of there being like no wheat and the ground being so over farmed, even without prohibition, like how many of the breweries down south would have survived anyways? Right? Like, would they have been able to afford to have
Even in
basically
the north,
shipped
yeah.
in the equipment or the material, sorry, the ingredients to brew because everything was so depleted around them? Like,
Yeah.
if you have a massive drought, are they going to allow you to just like use all this water to brew beer? I don't know. Like, they honestly might not have. A lot of them probably wouldn't have survived anyway. Probably more than prohibition allowed, but I'm sure it probably would have been pretty detrimental for the breweries down in the south as is. So kind of an extra interesting piece to consider in there is like maybe they wouldn't have made it anyways.
And I think that's a good point to some of the brew news that we've brought up in the past. You know, consolidations. We just talked about westbound and down. We've also talked about climate change and how that can affect our hops even growing, the taste of hops, just different models coming about. Are we getting perennial wheats, right? We talked about the kerns of grain. Anyway, like we already are well aware that things are more expensive, right?
Yep.
So not everybody's making it. And I think that's a great point that you're making. So important, like that period of history highlights how geography, industry type can influence the economic outcomes during these types of crises. And the brewing industry, despite prohibition, they truly managed to find a way to stay afloat, whereas the agricultural sector, especially in the South, really suffered extensively.
Yeah. This is a little bit like of a tangent. Malcolm Gladwell, who I love reading a lot of his books. One of his, I can't remember. I think it's the David and Goliath book. I'm pretty sure, and he actually talks about how you have all of these really influential people, but is it their genius or their influence, or is it like an outcome of the time that they like were alive and available? And this is kind of similar to that, right? Like one of the things we talk about, like all of like this huge percentage of professional hockey players were born during these certain months. Why? Because it actually makes them like a year older. They're on that cusp of being the older side of all the other players in hockey, and they're like, think of like a 12-year-old. If their age range is like 11 to 14, and you're on that 14, almost 15 cusp, like you're able to be so much better than everyone else around you because you're just bigger and stronger. And like he talks about Bill Gates. He was in an area where the local community or the local university had computers available that you could rent out. And so a bunch of the families got together and bought like oodles of hours for really, really cheap,
right,
to allow their kids like at an after school program to go spend time on the
Yeah.
computer. Well, nobody did it except for like him and one other person. And so by the time computers became like tangible for most people to afford in the home, he'd already had like 10,000 hours worth
Wow.
of computer time in.
So he's an expert already.
So he's already an expert, and it's literally just because he had access to it. Like
Sure.
he is genius. He is a genius, and he's brilliant. Don't like get me wrong, but it's literally because he just had access to it. So some of these breweries that survived further
Right
north,
place, right time.
right place, right time. Like they had access to alive cattle, which allowed them to invest in a totally different industry.
Right.
It's just, you're going to persevere. We're seeing this in the space now. There's a bit of a downturn. We've seen this through history of upturns. Some of them survive, some of them haven't. And it's just not always like your fault out of it. Like businesses are hard. We talked about there's a million reasons why your business isn't going to succeed. There's very few of why it's going to. And sometimes it's just being in the right place at the right time. And history has proven that over and over. And you can't take away from people finding it, right? Like Anheuser-Busch started 25 different businesses in 13 years, which is insane. And it was enough to keep them afloat.
Right.
Coors started a ceramic company that's still today the biggest manufacturer of ceramics in the world. So like, you can't knock them. They still came up with the opportunity. They still did incredible things with it. But if Yingling wouldn't have had access to dairy cattle, they wouldn't have started ice cream. They probably would not be around. That just is what it is. And so it's just like this interesting piece of like, a bit of a tangent there, but there is a really important factor of like time and place matters.
I like it. I like
yeah,
it.
we're gonna talk about the organized crime, bootlegging, and prohibition didn't just affect breweries; it gave rise to a whole underground world of alcohol production and distribution.
Oh, yeah. So I'm really excited to get into some more organized crime.
It's my side project. I'm really excited to get
Not
into
for me
some
personally, but like
organized
read about it and listen about it. Hashtag true crime. It's just really a real thing. Anyway, so I digress. Prohibition created a huge demand for illegal alcohol.
Yep.
Or alcohol, right? Which led to the rise of bootleggers and speakeasies.
Yep.
Absolutely. Organized crime saw a golden opportunity, snatched it out of the sky,
Yep.
and took off.
Yeah. I mean, they were up north in Chicago and New York, and that's where the hotbeds for bootlegging and organized crime.
So these cities that we're talking about were all New York, Chicago, etc. They were already economic centers. With an onset of prohibition, they became centers for illegal alcohol trade. And
Drumroll.
infamous figures like Mr. Al Capone himself
Yes.
in Chicago built criminal empires, literally empires, based on the supply of literally illegal booze.
And these implications were huge for American policies and the criminal justice system. The rise in organized crime led to an increase in corruption and a strain on law enforcement and the resources.
Isn't it ironic that prohibition was meant to reduce crime by eliminating alcohol, but instead it created an entirely new category of crime? Law enforcement was often, in this time, underfunded.
Yep.
And ill-equipped to deal with sophistication and powers that these guys and gals had, right? These criminal organizations. Okay.
The failure of prohibition and its role fueling organized crime played a big part in the eventual repeal on December 5th, 1933. And it's a classic case of it looked really good on paper, and it didn't play out well in real life.
Which we will be talking about the Boston Tea Party coming up here in a couple weeks on the 16th.
I'll learn that quote better.
You should.
This era really shaped how Americans viewed both alcohol and crime. It's a period of profound change where the intentions of prohibition collided with the harsh realities of economics, crime, and public desire.
That's right. And it shows how interconnected these aspects of history are. To your point, economy, agriculture, brewing, and even crime and politics, they're all part of this complex tapestry of prohibition.
Yeah. And speaking of complex tapestries, we're going to weave our way from our main segment right into our Q&A. And the Q&A segment, we're going to discuss the resurgence of the brew pub. This came out of Maine specifically. We're going to discuss why and why now. And the article came from down east, again out of Maine. And we're going to break it in some Q&As.
Little Q&A.
Let's get it started here, Lizzie. What is the current trend in Maine's craft breweries?
So glad you asked, Chelsea. So craft breweries in Maine have been increasingly incorporating their own kitchens, hence reviving the brew pub model that was super popular in the 90s. So this shift is observed across multiple breweries throughout the state. So what led to the original popularity of brew pubs in Maine?
All right. So Maine's first brew pub, Gritty McDuff's, opened in Portland, Maine. Don't confuse yourself there. In 1988, followed by others like Federal Jacks and Sea Dogs in the 90s. Initially, Maine's law maintained that serving drinks also required a kitchen, which is pretty common in a lot of different states, prompting breweries to combine the restaurant service with the beer production. So why did brew pubs fall out of style in the first place?
The brew pubs fell out of popularity from legislative changes in 2009.
Okay.
Maine allowed breweries to sell growlers directly to customers.
Okay.
And in 2012, individual pours in tap rooms were permitted.
Well,
These changes made it feasible for breweries to focus solely on beer production and on-site sales without the need of a kitchen. what's led to the recent revival then of the brew pub model, specifically in Maine?
Yeah, I'm gonna contribute this to our brews and bites segment.
Alright.
Yeah, like the brew pubs, they want to control the food. Like, and it's extra work, but we've all been at breweries, and either the food truck doesn't show up, or they broke down, or they kind of suck, or whatever reason. Right? There's a million things. It's really hard to combine two businesses and get them to be seamless together. That's just like a fact. That's just hard to do. You've ever tried to organize people to like go to an event together? It's exhausting. Like,
that's a really good point.
Herding cats, right? And it's a lot of work. And so a lot of the breweries now are just gonna start, having their own food, and there's a increase of demand. Like, you want your food, you want it to pair with you want your food to pair well with your beers. Sure. You want to have more control over the entire experience that people are there for, and there's demand for people, right? The guests want it, and so
it's really about controlling that customer experience, and you are the conductor of your production. Yeah. Right? You can't blame it on somebody else or point any fingers. You are the maker of your craft.
Yeah. I like the like combined like permanent food truck type of model. Because I like, personally, like, if I were to start up a brewery, I don't have the passion to run a kitchen, but I would want somebody that does. And so I like, we've talked about, you would be the one doing it. But like the food hall type of model, right? So that's kind of what having a permanent food truck there is. You get someone, and like they get to run it and own it, and like you do profit shares or whatever with it. Like I do like that model, and I think we're going to see kind of a mashup of that, because there's going to be something in there where you can have it and you don't necessarily have to get rid of your brewery license. And it just is going to come into like the state rules of how long like that location can be set up. But it's like a dumb rule, because you can, a lot of times you can just like move the truck around the block like once a week, and that's fine then.
You know who does this really well? You talked about the Avanti model, right? You rent out spaces within a building. Bristol Brewing.
Oh yeah.
In Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. What the fuck is that called? The lab. I just had it. The Scottish ale.
The Laughing Lab.
Laughing Lab. Oh my. One, kudos, and a lot of people have given them kudos because it's an incredible product and beer. But
it's won a lot of awards.
Exactly, right? Like, the people have spoken. Bristol Brewing is set up in an old elementary school. Yeah. In an older type of neighborhood in the Springs. It's Southern Springs, and it has that type of model. They do have a permanent food truck set up outside. It's like a barbecue type thing. Yep. But on the inside, there's a gift shop, there's a coffee shop, there's like a full service cocktail bar, other foods, and then they have a beautiful tap room as well that showcases them as a brewing. Obviously, would 100% support seeing more of that. Like, kudos to Bristol Brewing. Would love to go as much as possible.
Yeah, it
gives you options. How do you think then how has the customer expectations influenced this trend?
Yeah, I think in general the customers want food, right? It's
you want to get too lit up.
Yeah, one, it's more family friendly. Yeah, and like, I know there's a lot of places that aren't like necessarily like woohoo, like kids there, but there's a lot of really well behaved kids. Obviously some people ruin it, but like it is what it is. But guess what? People are also want to spend money. They want to get out of the house, and having that more full-fledged experience. I don't think people mind going and like grabbing their food from the food truck. It's just that inconsistency of, are they going to be open? Are they not? Are they going to be there? Are they not? Are they closed? Did they leave early? Did they run out of food? There's just so many variables that, like, we talked about the brewery in Boulder that we used to walk to all the time. Yeah. And then by like the third, fourth time in a couple months, they closed the kitchen 2 hours early. The amount of times we didn't go there, like, that was the excuse. Would be like, cool, like walk the dogs and grab a beer and grab some food for the night. We just didn't go anymore because it was like, if we're not gonna be able to get food because we have no idea if the kitchen's open, we'll just go walk the dogs somewhere else, and we'll just like make something at home, or we'll order in. We'll do like we just came up with something different. So I think because of the inconsistencies with food trucks, it's just, when people are hungry, people are mean.
Hangry.
They're hangry. They don't want to have to deal with not consistent quality, not knowing what's going on. People want the food that they're there
or for. They deal with it one time and one time only.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
people
all you
don't
get
have
to
a lot
see
of
'em.
patience with food.
Well,
That
not
just is what it is.
not when there's a plethora of options.
Beer facts. Did you know that the game Monopoly was one of the most popular games like ever?
Still is.
Still is. But it was actually patented in 1935.
Oh my gosh. I don't understand the 30s at all.
No, yeah, like literally during the Great Depression. Let's
And Prohibition.
well, Prohibition
I
was
guess
done
it
by
was
then,
over.
Yeah. Yeah, so but like during the Great Depression, let's make a game about booming real estate
Yikes.
and crushing opponents financially and then hitting them and winning by being more wealthy and squashing them. It's sad and hilarious and funny.
When you really think about it.
When you really think about it.
Yeah.
Charles Darrow was the guy that made it. He actually was the first game designer to become a millionaire off the game.
Oh, wow.
But it kind of brings up a fun, weird point about how like it seems like that shouldn't be the game, but it also makes sense that it's the game because it's just tapping into people's fantasies at the time,
Sure.
right? Like they're not actually getting wealthy, so like they need to like find a way
Dream
to
about
like,
it.
dream about it, but like have
Strategize
some
about
fun.
it.
Yeah, have some fun with dreaming about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of makes sense on it there.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Why not? You're
not?
sitting there starving and eating potatoes, and you're like, you know what? I'm going to buy a boardwalk for $4,000,
Why not? Yeah, who doesn't have that laying around?
which in today's world is like $400,000. So I guess it's like a townhouse in Denver.
During the Prohibition, what came up previously before the Monopoly came out was all the speakeasies in the cocktail culture. The Prohibition era led to the rise of speakeasies, illicit bars where people could secretly enjoy alcoholic beverages. Ooh. Period also signifies an influence of the American cocktail culture. Bartenders began to start mixing drinks and adding various ingredients. But do you know why they started this?
I don't actually.
Yeah. So it's not because like, ooh, we all love like a pineapple in our drink. Yeah, a little shaky shake.
Oh,
Oh.
it's 2 episodes in a row.
It's 2 episodes in a row. It's not because we just want all these fruits and lovely flavors in there. It's actually because there was so much crappy homemade alcohol. They had to cover up the flavor of how bad it all tasted. So it's really not like we've made it into this ideal mixology and all this fun, but it was really just because alcohol sucked at the time. And so you have cocktails like the Sidecar and Mary Pickford that trace their origins all the way back to this era, and they're still popular today. So kind of a funny, this like luxury cocktails are so expensive, and you go to like some of the speakeasies in Denver, and like there's all this passion and like these. There's I'm trying to think of Berlin we went to where there's a cocktail bar, and going on this like 1 beer a year, they would have, I think it was 2 drinks.
Yep.
A day. Like that day they would release 2 drinks, and that is all they made. You couldn't order anything else. And so we've made it this prestige thing where then it was just like, oh God, how do we make this palatable so we can like enjoy it instead of just like, chugging it down and being done.
It's kind of reminiscent. I'm going to go back to cooking, but that's kind of how I feel about some of my dishes that I make sometimes. I'm like, ooh. And then you're like, oh, what if I put it in a fried rice?
Everything in a fried rice is fine.
Fried rice is my mixed cocktail.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I love that, though. Actually, when we were in Berlin, that's where I learned the term Nachkeinsbitte. Because I kept trying to order another drink at that place, that particular bar, and the guy I was sitting next to, and he's like, no, just say one more, please. just quit trying. Just Nachkeinsbitte. just one more.
That's funny.
And then you don't have to worry about the rest of it. You don't give a shit if there's a cherry on top or a dash of bitters.
Just get what you get. Cool concept though, but it's memorable because it's unique and different.
Absolutely.
Another little tidbit I wanted to throw in on the Prohibition stuff of the crummy tasting alcohol is a little fact of how many people died
from botulism
from their terribly unsanitized, poorly made booze.
It kind of questions you know, when you buy canned jams, jellies,
Oh,
jars,
yeah.
sauces
Yeah,
at
yeah.
farmers market. No offense. I mean, some people
Give
do
them all the
really
time.
well,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, it's just kind of like this funny, like, oh yeah, like all these people got sick and like the hospital visits were like skyrocketing.
oh my God.
And they were like, oh, like we're gonna get rid of alcohol because people are drinking too much and like people are getting hurt and they're getting sick and going to the hospitals. Where way more people got sick because of unsanitary things they were drinking.
And Al Capone. You got Al
And
Capone.
So getting back into Al Capone.
Oh, nice.
Fun fact number 3 is Al Capone's soup kitchens.
What was the soup du jour?
Obviously,
The
he was
soup of
known
the
for
day,
his criminal
obviously.
empire during Prohibition, but he had a soft side,
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
allegedly, that he contributed to society by opening one of the first soup kitchens in Chicago during the Great Depression.
Sweet.
What a good guy,
What a good guy.
The kitchen served 3 meals a day to ensure that unemployed people could eat, providing a rare positive perspective on an otherwise notorious figure. Some people viewed this as an opportunity to clean up his image. I don't know if you believe that or not. Undoubtedly, it still provided a much needed assistance during a difficult time. I do not believe it.
That he had a soft side or that he didn't?
I mean, I'm sure at some point he had a soft side, but I definitely don't believe he was doing that for the good of the people. I'm banking on either a little bit of I don't know how the taxes were wrote for nonprofits, but either a little bit of a money laundering,
A little bit of a tax
write-off, something in there, or
well played, Rhoads.
or if you really want to get mean, if you really want to become like a controlling hierarchy human, put people in debt. Not just financially, but, you know, if you feed them and keep them alive for 6 months and all of a sudden you need a favor, people are probably going to do you a solid because they're only alive because of you.
That's very tyrannical of you.
Like a tyrannical Rex.
Wowza. Hey, so I've been feeding you for the last 6 months, and I really need this one to go.
Yeah, we never saw that happen. Caesar.
You mean the little pizza guy?
Little pizza, yeah. We're all going to owe him someday. Pizza, you owe me your debts.
That's a good point. I would I would like to explore that further or start a conversation about it.
Yeah, that might not necessarily be a fun fact.
We have to read
but
some
it's
more
a
about
fun
Al
opinion.
Capone. It's a fun opinion. Yes. Yes.
Like
I like it.
Inside Out. Oh no, all these opinions and facts got mixed together. It's fine. It happens all the time.
Yeah. That's such a good movie.
That's the best. That's like my
Such
favorite
a good
part.
movie.
I
I like the long-term memory.
Yeah, that one's good
Just
too.
goes.
That one's good too. But yeah, I don't know if in the soup kitchens if he paired any of his illegal booze with the delicious soups, but that's going to segue us right into our Brews and Bites, brought to you by Elizabeth Hess or Liz Hess,
Depending on how close we are.
depending on how close.
All right. So, Chelsea, it is fascinating to think about how the Prohibition era and the Great Depression not only influenced the economy and crime, but it also influenced American diets and beer consumption. So American tables at the time were dominated by affordable, filling foods. We're talking about soup kitchens, soups, stews, a lot of homemade bread, and of course, potatoes.
Oh, yeah.
The starch of all kings, the king of all starches.
Sounds like my breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Oh my God. So they're staples, mainly due to their low cost and how versatile they were and are in a variety of meals. Fried rice, right? And to be honest, my favorite food sounds like some of your favorite foods as well. The impact of Prohibition, right? American diet. Prohibition's in full swing, 1920-ish to 1933, when producing, importing, transporting, and selling alcohol, completely illegal. We've covered that. So it drastically limited our legal beer consumption.
Okay.
Sad face. So the beers that people did manage to drink were likely homemade or obtained through some illicit means, maybe a soup kitchen.
Al Capone.
And let me tell you, based on that note alone, it's pretty evident that the quality and style of these brews was varied massively. So this era really saw the rise of what you might call home brews, bathtub gin, and those low alcohol near beers. Okay. And they're much simple, less refined compared to the wide array of beers that we enjoy today, which there's premium flavor, variety, and quality. Okay.
So the you talk about having all these different home brews and different things.
Mm-hmm.
Based on the amount of hops that was purchased in the Prohibition time and the malts, the barley, the malt, the liquid malt.
Liquid malt?
Liquid malt. The malts that they would sell.
Yeah,
Put a
syrup.
winky face because there's actually a winky character
Yeah.
for advertising that they're like, yeah, just buy this malt.
Yep.
You don't know what you're using it for.
Yep.
Anyways, based on the amount of hops sold and those sold, they predict that there was nearly 700 million barrels of homebrewed beer
Wow.
brewed during the Prohibition.
Wow. So in honor of our discussion today, obviously we're going to discuss a meal that was popular during Prohibition and the Great Depression. So one might consider a classic like meatloaf. And for those of you that are following a vegan or vegetarian diet, a meatloaf recipe is easily replicated. You can use beans, grains, mushrooms, or your favorite nut. We recommend a walnut. So the meatloaf dish is economical, it's affordable ingredients, and it often extends them with fillers like breadcrumbs.
Okay.
And it's a practical choice during a time when resources are limited. So taking this into modern age, so pairing this with a beer that resembles what might have been available during that time.
Yeah.
So brown ales, they're known for their mild, nutty, and slightly sweet flavors, which would have been achievable in the brewing techniques during this time. So going to our senses, we'll start with sight. So the rich brown hue of the ale complements the hearty rustic appearance of the meatloaf. I can just see it sitting there in Ma's bread pan and that crust of meat. Yeah. Okay, so you got the ketchup on the top. So it's a visual harmony, right? You're like, I can see Ma's meatloaf right there. It sets the stage, and it's a match that is both comforting and homey. I love a good meatloaf. Anyway, all right. So now you're smelling it, and you're like, okay, brown ales, they often have a mild malty aroma. There's hints of caramel, depending on that, sniffer of yours, which would balance the savory umami scent of the meatloaf. So it's inviting, it's homey, and it evokes that sense of warmth and satisfaction. And then what does it taste like? So Ma's meatloaf and brown ales, the malty sweetness, a subtle nuttiness, right? So if you are doing like a vegan, vegetarian, that nut's super gonna pop.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so touch, texture. Brown ale is typically smooth, medium body texture. It wouldn't overpower Ma's meatloaf. Pairing is meant to ensure that neither the drink nor the food really overwhelms the other, but they complement each other, especially in a mouthfeel as well. And then there's the sound. We can't go away without evoking our sound. And there's the pour of the beer.
I just poured it out. Damn it.
Oh, man.
I could have done
The
it.
soft clink of the glass can enhance the comforting, relaxed dining experience. There's a sound of a knife and a fork. Don't screech it, because that hurts the ears. And it's just that like familiar. That was good. That was good. Homey sound that aligns with. It's more of like a casual, right? Unpretentious nature of enjoying this brown ale and meatloaf.
Remember, everyone, life's too short
As it
to
is.
drink bad beer or to decide if you like crackers and food or not. Thank you for listening and tuning in. Again, thank you always for all the support, supporting the podcast, supporting us as we go. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like, share on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. In addition, you can follow us on Body by Beer Podcast on all the social medias. And we love you all. Can't wait to this has been a really fun episode. We're really happy with how this one turned out, and we can't wait to get it to you guys. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.